There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Alright, creaky music. This is Media Mothership here with myself as the host, Dr Craig Norris, PhD, joined by a responsible adult for the show today. Responsible adult, MA Marcus, Mr. Marcus MA. How are you, Marcus?
Very well, thank you, Dr. Norris. How are you?
Very good on this Friday before Christmas weekend. And excited, you can feel the frisson in the air.
Frisson? What does that mean? Sorry.
French word, a kind of sense of electricity.
Yeah, I can feel that. I always feel that it's because it's Christmas Eve, and that's usually when I start getting really excited for Christmas. Did the last of my shopping today. Just got to wrap it all up, and it's gonna be all good.
I'm very impressed of you surviving the crowds. Were there crowds?
There were crowds, yes. That's all right. I had willpower and fortitude to brave them. So I just thought I can do this. I'm just an NPC in a swarm of other NPCs.
Yeah, think of yourself as being in a story. Does help make sense. And your story came to a happy conclusion, happy ending.
Yes, I got all my Christmas shopping done. I've got presents for everyone that I need to get presents for. And tomorrow I'm going to be making a lot of mashed potato for Sunday.
Sounds like a real hero's quest.
Absolutely it is. I've got like a kilo and a half. No, 2 or 3 kilos of potatoes in my bag, ready to be in my bag in my car, ready to be roasted and mashed.
That makes more sense. Well, you're listening to Media Mothership. On this show, we look at everything in and around the world of media, particularly how it shapes our understanding sometimes of the world around us. And we're broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios here in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. If you want to reach out to us to send us a message, you can send us a chat on YouTube or Twitch, which we're streaming live at the moment, or SMS us on 04888 11707. That number again, 04888 11707. I'll try to keep an eye on that, possibly, to see if there are any messages. But yes, this is us, Media Mothership, and of course it's the last show of 2022. It's a great pleasure to have you on, Marcus, to be able to attain a sense of closure.
It's good to be back. I've been meaning to get in for a while, but there's always been something to do something to take care of on Friday afternoon.
It is Friday afternoon.
It is very Friday afternoon, yes.
Because on today's show, we're wrapping up the epic journey we've been on for the last, I want to say 14, 15 episodes, deep diving into the 1959 classic movie House on Haunted Hill. We're now in the last 5 minutes, and we're going to explore a little bit about how you end a story, given that we're going to have the end of the story as the discussion piece for today. So we're going to talk about the ending of that film in terms of how it ended. And maybe look at some of the conventions of storytelling that's there. And, of course, Marcus seems to know all the TV tropes linked to this film. So I'm going to quiz him on some of the TV tropes that are linked to this film to see if he can unpack their broader significance. There's a bit of news we're going through, if we get around to it. Henry Cavill, of course, with Warhammer. The term kid-dolts to describe how much purchasing power adults have buying stuff that was seen as for kids but are really for them as adults. So mainly toy sales over this festive period being driven by a lot of adults for themselves rather than kids. All that and more here on the World of Media Mothership here on Edge Radio 99.3 as we explore the bizarre intricacies of media and popular culture.
That was a cool bit of music.
I got 2 stingers now. Yeah, and the problem is I can't figure out on my music player how to just pause after playing a song. So it just plays the 2 stingers that I've got. But they're pretty good. The first one is called Danson de Passion. Danson de Passion. De Passion. D. What language uses D?
I mean, there's a few.
Hands-on dépassement.
It can. I mean, it could be German, it could be French, it could be Spanish.
Going Spanish.
Just it does sound very Spanish. Or it could be French, or it could be German. It could be all three. It could be Esperanto for all we know.
I like that. Esperanto, universal language. Yeah, it never got picked up as broadly as it could have in concert. But yeah, good idea, I think, Esperanto. But yeah.
Did you know that Star Trek, the original Star Trek, was meant to be filmed in Esperanto?
No way.
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry thought that by whenever Star Trek is set, that we would have adopted Esperanto as a universal language. Could you just imagine everyone on the Starship Enterprise speaking Esperanto instead of English? I can't. That'd
Definitely
be fascinating.
Not. Hey, that would be a great. Have you ever used that in a quiz? What film was made in Esperanto? Have you ever done that? Is that something that's ever come up?
No, I do know there was a William Shatner movie filmed in Esperanto. I don't know which one it is, though. I'm pretty sure there was a curse associated with that film as well.
A curse.
It's like just horrible things happen to all the cast members in real life.
What was, because one of the other jobs you do is as a quiz host. What was the question you asked about the Star Wars curse? Wasn't there Star Trek? Sorry,
Oh yeah, the Star Trek movie curse.
What is that?
So the Star Trek movie curse says that the even-numbered Star Trek movies are usually good. The odd-numbered ones are usually bad.
The odd-numbered ones, yeah. That includes that famous one directed by William Shatner, The Undiscovered Country.
The Final Frontier. So The Undiscovered Country was the sixth one. That's actually meant to be pretty good, but the fifth one, Final Frontier, is generally seen as the nadir of the series. But there are exceptions, because Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, is generally seen as being pretty good. And Star Trek, I think it's Nemesis, is the fourth TNG movie. Everyone agrees is pretty terrible.
Right, yep, but there are exceptions to the rule.
So yeah, it's not a definitive rule. It's just in a general sense. Usually, the even-numbered ones are good and the odd-numbered ones are not good.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification. Also, just a bit of a plug. You do have a quiz show starting back up in 2023, early January 6th.
Yes. Friday, January the 6th, 7 p.m. at the Republic Bar and Cafe, the upstairs area. It's $5 to enter. That goes towards prizes.
And if people want to know more, they can just...
Yes. Head to TazPop on the TazPop Facebook page for more information.
Yes. Have they announced that they're doing something here on Edge?
Yes, TazPop's going to be running a radio show.
I would just have stolen that thunder then. TazPop, yeah, so TazPop, of course, the brains trust, really, the creative, emotional brains trust of popular culture in Tasmania, are doing a radio show here on Edge in 2023.
Yes.
Are you going to be doing anything with it?
Look, almost certainly. I don't know when, given that I am a teacher, so I'm usually pretty busy during the day. Though I do end reasonably early, so I can sneak off, but it's during the day. I will be just doing it on school holidays, not as a general thing.
But exciting news there.
Yes, very keen for it. It's going to be good. We've got a lot to say.
All right. Well, okay, so that's a bit of the exciting news for 2023 out of the way. Now, House on Haunted Hill, let's just wrap it up. So Annabelle and David have been having an affair. We found that out in the previous 5-minute chunk. Those were the two. Annabelle we thought was dead. David's the doctor. We didn't realize they were in cahoots to plot a murder scheme. So it turned out the film kind of changed gears from a horror film into a whodunit, where they were basically gaslighting character Nora, which was a real surprise to me in terms of having chosen a film that ended up being the Merriam-Webster Dictionary's hottest word of 2022, which was gaslighting. So I felt very, very contemporary. So Nora was being gaslit. She shot Frederick, or thought she shot Frederick. In this 5 minutes, we find out that she didn't kill Frederick. In fact, Frederick, played by Vincent Price, had put blanks in the guns because he was actually doing his own con to get his wife and her lover killed, which he did. In the final 5 minutes, they both die, with Frederick pushing poor old David into the acid tub. Classic scene. And then, of course, in this 5 minutes, what we have is this great scene of Frederick using the skeletal remains of Dr. Trent on a kind of marionette that he uses to freak his wife out. He doesn't realize Dr. Trent's dead. freak his wife out and pushes her into the acid vat too, dispatching both of them. So both those guys die, and the film wraps up with Vincent Price Frederick telling everyone that Annabelle and David were criminals, and they're both dead, and he is happy to let to be arrested to see what the court says about this. It's an interesting kind of ending. I'll play the ending sequence now. What I'll do is I'll set it up first with the scene of Vincent Price being very hammy. I mean, if anything, this has been a wonderful ham-fest of a film in terms of the brilliant overacting, which only Vincent Price could do. So in this scene, Vincent has dispatched his wife, and he's got his marinade gear and the prop skeleton there, and he's looking at the bubbling acid pit, and he says the following little monologue there of their death, which we'll hear now on Horse and Hound until 1959.
Good night, Doctor. Good night, Annabelle. The crime you two planned was indeed perfect. Only the victim is alive and the murderers are not. It's a pity you didn't know when you started your game of murder that I was playing too.
There must be some way.
All right. Now, okay, so that scene where Vincent Price is explaining that, little did you know as you were playing your game of murder that I was playing too, is a key TV trope, which TV trope defines as being the colliding criminal conspiracy moment. And also the second TV trope which happens there of being out-gambited.
Out-gambited, yes.
And yeah, it's an interesting idea, the colliding criminal conspiracy. So again, the fact that you have the wife and her lover having a criminal conspiracy that is a twist at the end to kill Frederick, Vincent Price's character. And then, of course, we think Vincent Price's character dies, but then in a twist, he's alive because he swapped it with blanks, and as that dialogue reveals, he out-gambited them by killing them off. It was very convoluted.
Can I just say, if they were blanks, he would still be dead.
Oh, right, because blanks, even, as we know, in very sad circumstances, prop guns can kill.
Yeah, and just blanks, just because of the propellants they put in blanks to simulate the noise, they will still kill at close range, just from the pure concussive force coming out of the gun. Blowing
holes through the suspension of disbelief this film attempted to attain. He can't fool Marcus.
Sorry, just gotta ruin things for everybody.
Now, one of the things that was really interesting, so TV Tropes, great website, it went through a couple of tropes which that kind of scheme sets up. So when you're watching a film that has a number, particularly when it's a whodunit film, and it has a number of twists within it, now they refer to it as the Kansas City Shuffle, which they define as the film is essentially a whole load of characters going around trying to trap and falling into the traps of others. Well, in this film at least, this was a lot of our characters. Now, the Kansas City Shuffle is I'll read you this quote. It's from a webcomic called The Order of the Stick. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Reasonably. I haven't read a huge amount of it, but I've heard a lot about it.
Well, this is from the famous issue 428 episode.
A classic.
428, yeah. Okay, so in this scene, character's talking about the Kansas City Shuffle, which he explains as the following. A con man doesn't choose to play the shell game with you if there's any possibility of him actually losing. So, of course, the shell game's that 3 cups, underneath is a ball, and you shuffle the cups up on the table, and you guess where the ball is. Anyway, so a con man doesn't choose to play the shell game with you if there's any possibility of him actually losing. The con isn't getting you to pick the wrong shell. The con is getting you to accept that the basic premise of the game is still being followed. The con is getting you to pick a shell at all. Right, so the con's being you to actually start playing the game. The ball isn't under the first shell or the second shell or even the third shell. The ball is in the con man's palm the whole time. Right, so I guess what this is setting up is the idea that the Kansas City Shuffle con, relies on misdirection, But in most cases, the con artist wants the victim to believe that it's not a con at all. But in a Kansas City Shuffle con, the con artist needs the victim to do three things. So the first thing is to suspect that they are involved in a con game. Right? So you need the victim to suspect that, hey, this is a con. And the second thing they need them to do is to think that they've figured out how to beat the con, though. Right? So, yeah, I know this the shell game, it's a con. But I think I've got a way. I'm going to be watching you because I think I can trick you and beat the con. But the third thing is the victim is wrong about what the real con is. Right, so there's three clever steps of this. Have you ever heard the Kansas City Shuffle?
Yeah, I've heard about it on TV Tropes a lot. I think one of the most famous examples of the Kansas City Shuffle is the episode of South Park where Cartman tricks his bully into eating his own parents.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and because the kid thinks he's figured out the con is like, yeah, that's right, because he thinks the con is the Cartman's put pubic hair in the soup.
Yeah.
Right, and then out of nowhere, Cartman says, no, you've eaten your parents.
Yeah, exactly.
And the only reason he went in and had it was to say, I figured out your con, which is a particularly dark, always South Park one. So in this film, though, the House on Haunted Hill, the Kansas City Shuffle con was operating because, if we're taking it from the point of view of Vincent Price's character, Vincent Price wanted his wife to suspect that the party was an elaborate scheme for him to kill her, right? So that there was a con going on. Right, so he did this. The wife was very suspicious that she was involved in a setup for her death in this haunted house. But, of course, as we know in this film, she thinks she's figured out her husband's plan. And so she's figured out a way to in a way, double-cross him. No, not double-cross, in terms of she's figured out a way to kill him instead. Right, so she thinks, oh, no. I know what your con is here, is to kill me. I've got you beaten, though. Not only am I going to beat you in this con, I'm going to kill you too. But she was wrong the whole time. She thought she killed the husband, but in fact, yes, the husband was alive, and then did a gaslighting on her by animating the skeleton to kill her. Very convoluted. What's interesting, it's interesting going into the Kansas City Shuffle, because I want to know why it's called Kansas City. Do you know the story behind it? The trope page goes into it.
Oh, I wish I did know it. That sounds fascinating.
Well, I'll tell you, right. Thank you, Dorothy Dixon kind of question. The trope namer is the song The Kansas City Shuffle, which is explained in detail in the movie Lucky Number 11, which I've not seen. In the United States, Kansas City is one of the largest cities in the state of Missouri. Now, there is also a Kansas City, Kansas, which is literally across the state line, but Kansas City, Kansas is a much smaller city, more like a suburb of Missouri City, and usually not what people think about when they're talking about Kansas City, the metropolitan area. So we have Kansas City in Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas. So this, people say, is a near-perfect physical metaphor of the idea of the Kansas City Shuffle. When you look on one side of the river, you're on the other. So you're saying, I'm in Kansas City, but you're in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas. I don't know. That didn't really shed much light on it to me. I mean, there are two Kansas Cities. You think you know which Kansas City you're in, but it's the other one, which is that kind of misdirection thing.
Yeah, it's basically just a magician's sleight of hand is essentially what it is.
Yep. Which is misdirection.
Yeah.
So that's the Kansas City Shuffle. So there's Kansas City Shuffle there. The great thing about the Kansas City Shuffle is that it gets us to trot out what's considered the director's signature style, William Castle's signature style, which is that there has to be a gimmick, particularly a fourth wall gimmick in all his films in like the 1950s and 60s. Now, in this case, in House on Haunted Hill, in this last 5-minute scene, we have his gimmick, which is a model skeleton is elevated over the movie audience in the theater as they're watching this last 5 minutes, as the skeleton is kind of reeled up out of the acid pit. A real skeleton then is reeled across the audience that's sitting in the theater. And there's this weird scene in the movie where the film does this long pan shot that just takes forever. Like it does a pan shot from the skeleton rising up from the acid bath, and it does this long pan shot around the basement, and you're thinking, wow, this is really setting up the decor strongly. That's because for the cinema audience, that's when the usher, or whoever's doing the prop, gets the skeleton to wave over the audience in that scene. And then there's this very elaborate scene where Vincent Price walks into the stage, walks onto the scene, walks into the scene, and he's got this big marionette, and he starts reeling it in, and then the skeleton appears from like stage right as he reels it in. That's this very elaborate moment. Would you like to see more props in movies? Do you think a floating skeleton would be a talking point for you? Like
it would certainly be a talking point, but I feel it's more advantageous towards theatre than an actual film, because when anything happens in the real world to distract from what's happening on screen in a movie, it breaks the illusion very quickly, I feel.
It does. But we were talking tonight. They're doing a screening of Die Hard, great Christmas movie, and it's at Rewind Cinema. And one of the fun things about that would work in that kind of space, right, where you've got a kind of cult audience coming to see a cult film, and everyone's kind of bought a ticket for a little bit of kind of cult pageantry. And I think that kind of prop thing would work in a cult movie for a cult audience.
Well, I mean, I think that's a somewhat different thing. You think about Rocky Horror and the audience participation in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where people throw rice during the wedding scene, or they yell out things to the characters. But then it's more of a participatory thing than just a prop getting trundled out near the end, because they're engaged with it from the very beginning. So it's not so much you're watching a movie and then something happens in the real world. It's from the start you're engaged with what's happening in the real world, as dictated by the movie.
Yeah, and it would be more fun also if the audience was asked to participate some way with the skeleton, like the Rocky Horror thing. People throw objects at the screen at particular moments. So a bit more participatory, but there's not many stunts. Now, the other interesting thing about the end of this film, which is again referenced in TV tropes, is it bookends nicely in terms of the first and last lines are spoken by the same character, directly addressing the audience, breaking the fourth wall. And what's interesting, and I'll play the clip from this scene that he talks about, is that TV tropes refers to this moment as the fourth wall will not protect you, though. Right? So it's him saying that they're going to come for you. So we'll listen to this scene, which is interesting because, again, the movie had been setting up this idea that it's not a ghost movie. That ghost dimension is all about gaslighting Nora to freak out, go hysterical, and kill Frederick. And the reveal is that there weren't ghosts there at all. But this is how they try to wrap the film up. And we'll play the scene in terms of the direct address and the spookiness of it, and then talk about what that means in terms of an ending for a film. So this is the character of Pritchard, who's a kind of drunk horror guide during the movie, looking at the bubbling kind of corpses that are in the acid pit, and he delivers this very memorable line.
There'll be more, many more.
All right, I'll go back. We'll set it up a bit better. There we go.
Now there are 9. There'll be more, many more. They're coming for me now. And then they'll come for you.
Then they'll come for you. Direct address to camera. I don't know if there are many films which do the fourth wall won't save you. This moment in a film where the character looks directly at you and says, now you're in danger. Now these ghosts are coming for you.
I think one of the really big ones that first jumps to mind is Paranormal Activity.
Yes, because we do see a lot of the idea of a domestic space, video recordings, not video recordings, the surveillance recordings.
Because that was sort of like marketed as, oh, this really happened. Yet it ends with Katie lunging at the camera with a very demonic look on her face. Which
Yes.
The implication obviously being she's out there and she's gonna come and get you.
Yes. No, look, and that's always so interesting in terms of, and let's get to this idea of the ending, because people don't really talk about House on Haunted Hill, but
They do now.
That's right. They do talk, like, in the TV tropes, they do talk about the fact that this is, in a way, an ambiguous ending, much like a great segue with the paranormal activity film, because everything that, the film does explain everything that Annabelle and Dr. Trent's been doing has been a scheme to cause Nora's character to go hysterical, and so there's no supernatural elements involved. Or is there? Which is what that final scene kind of suggests to us. Is there really? Because there are a number of scenes there which aren't really explained in terms of, like, there's blood that appears, there's blood that drips onto this woman's hand. There's this things where it's kind of like, maybe it's just a mundane murder story, or maybe it is supernatural. It's not a strong one, but...
There's a trope for that called maybe magic, maybe mundane.
That's right. Yes, there is. Maybe magic, maybe mundane. So I was really interested in that idea of what the stake is for setting up an ambiguous ending. I can't quite decide whether or not the ending of House on Haunted Hill, because it does try to wrap itself up neatly in terms of saying, this was a whodunit film, who killed... Well, yeah, it's really a murder mystery film in terms of, there's 2 murders or 3 murders by the end of the film, but 2 twists involving cons that have been set up elaborately throughout the film. So there is a kind of straightforward ending. It's not a happy ending or a sad ending in a way, because, the character of Frederick, played by Vincent Price, is, he's a bit of a cad. He's had 4 wives by this time, and there's suspicion over the circumstances of the death of the other 3 wives. So it's a bit unusual, but I don't know if it's going for a specifically ambiguous ending. Let's listen. There's this Robert McKee, the famous kind of scriptwriter, story writer, guru, has this YouTube that I want to play the first couple of minutes from, where he talks about what the difference is between ironic endings and ambiguous endings, and why he feels that ambiguous endings can sometimes be so frustrating for an audience, right? When you're left ambiguously thinking, so are there ghosts here, or are there not ghosts in this movie? I didn't get it. Compared to an open ending, where it's like, well, maybe the character was alive all the time, right? Maybe they don't die, where it's given the choice to the audience to decide. Anyway, let's hear how he defines the 4 types of endings which often happen in films.
To answer this question, we have to distinguish between 4 different kinds of endings. There's the straightforward ending that is either a happy ending or a negative ending. There's an ironic ending. There's an ambiguous ending, and then there's the open ending. And of course, a straightforward ending is simply a climax that radically changes the balance of the character's life, either to the positive, they get what they want, and the balance of life is restored happily, and there's nothing negative about it. It's just purely positive, purely happy. Or a dark, tragic or negative ending in which the characters are killed, perhaps, or they're destroyed. Nothing is learned from this, nothing good in any sense come out of it. It's just a tremendous devastation at the ending, purely negative.
So he goes on then to talk about the ironic ending, which is where the character does get what they want, but it comes at an enormous cost, right? There's a kind of irony towards...
The trope name for that is bittersweet ending.
Yes, bittersweet, which I think is a better one than ironic, because I'm not quite sure if attaining what you want but at enormous cost is ironic. It depends on the story in which that cost was explained, right? Like, gee, I didn't want to lose my hand, so I spent all this time avoiding that danger to happen, and then, at the end, I lost it unexpectedly because of this act or something, right? Oh, that's ironic. Whereas, yes, bittersweet, yes, that this is success without. I don't think it's either of those. So Robert McKee then goes on to say, you know, one of the things that can happen is you're trying to set up an open ending in terms of the audience figuring out, wow, is this main character guilty or not? Is it ghosts or not? But it can lead to the audience just getting confused. Let's hear what he has to say about that.
Very different shades of endings. And the problem often is that people who want to create an open ending end up creating an ambiguity so that the audience is really left hanging. They cannot, in their own mind, make a choice of how it might have ended in the future because the material doesn't allow that. I think audiences or readers find ambiguous endings particularly annoying. They understand the principle of the open ending, but they do want to be able to choose a possible future. And so all those four...
So it's interesting comparing House on Haunted Hill with Paranormal Romance, Paranormal Activity, is that I think Paranormal Activity is setting up this open ending question in terms of you can see this as, you know, it's giving you evidence, giving you clues to say, well, the paranormal continues in this space. Or do you think there'd be a contrary ending you could say from that information? Or does it really not really an open ending? It's more like, this is paranormal.
Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity, I'd say, is more of a it's a straightforward ending because it's a downer ending. Katie gets possessed and her husband, I can't remember his name, is killed by her while she's under possession. So yeah, it's more an element of the fourth wall will not protect you because she's then. The one that I'd really pick is probably one of the more famous examples of either an open or an ambiguous ending is the ending of The Sopranos. Which people have, for those who haven't seen it, it's just Tony Soprano and his family having dinner at a restaurant. There are a few shots of a random guy who's never been seen before, and then it smashes to black mid-scene. And people have debated on whether or not if the ending represents him dying from being shot or having a heart attack, or if it just means that he goes about his life, but he's scared he's going to be killed at any moment. And people were furious about that. Would you say it's more of an open ending or an ambiguous ending?
I think the fury around it suggests many people reacted to that as an ambiguous ending.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe Inception is more of a clever open ending because it depends on if you want the film to have a happy or tragic concluding part. That, you know, because the ending of Inception involves the camera lingering on the spinning top, right? And the idea being that was this semiotic gesture to the fact that maybe this is all happening within a dream of the main character. That the happy ending that we think we're presented with is possibly there's evidence to say that's not the case. It might be a sad ending. The thing about why I think that's quite an open ending is because then there's a lot of fan theories around what the real totems are within this film. Like people are saying, well, the real totem that DiCaprio's character has is not the spinning top, it's the wedding ring.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's a really that's what I'd see as quite an open ending in terms of the fans really getting into that film, analyzing it, having a lot of fan theories. And also I think there is a happy or sad narrative that can come from choosing, you know, well, I think the character does live at the end, or the character is in a dream instead, or something like that. But Blade Runner is another famous one because they had two different cuts of that, or there's many cuts of that now, but I think that's another one where it's an open ending specifically at the end, which is contested in terms of you have the theatrical release, which has a happy ending, right? The idea that they drive off into the beautiful countryside, which is untouched by the rain in Cyberpunk that the rest of the film takes place in, and also what was it with that voiceover narration where Harrison Ford sounds like someone's holding a gun to his head. It turned out the 4-year expiration date didn't apply to Rachel. That's right. And so, yeah, I think that's going to like, I don't know, a studio decision or something to give it a happy ending. Whereas the director's cut's really interesting because it ends with the paper origami unicorn that's left there at the door. again, open ending in terms of you can read that paper origami unicorn a
So,
couple of ways.
to give context to those who have not seen Blade Runner, the main character Deckard has a dream about a unicorn halfway through the film, and there are a lot of animal motifs within the film. And so Gaff, who is his handler, who just sort of follows him around, leaves an origami unicorn at his door. They've never talked about it. The implication being that Deckard himself is also a replicant but doesn't know it, and Gaff knows that he's a replicant because he knows of all of his thoughts, memories, and dreams. And so he's leaving that there as a calling card, basically to say, I know you're a replicant, you don't have long to live, but I'll give you a head start, get out of town.
Yeah, which I think is a kind of open ending. I mean, I think there's definitely evidence there that there's a preferred reading of that. And again, there's been interviews with Ridley Scott and Harrison Ford talking about this, where Harrison Ford says, no, I played it as human, I don't see it as a replicant, whereas Ridley Scott saying, no, replicant, the ending was the big reveal, the twist that he was a replicant.
I believe also the screenwriter
Right.
was not thrilled with the idea of Deckard being a replicant.
Right.
Because it undercuts the main theme of the story.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think the film's richer with that. Or maybe it's just having a twist was interesting.
It's having now with the film bros talking about Blade Runner. I don't know. I'm going to make a very, very simple thesis that the idea of Deckard being a replicant is a twist for the sake of there being a twist. I think the film makes a lot more sense and is more thematically rich if he is not a replicant. And that's all I got to say about that.
I have to watch it again. I would look forward to watching it again.
Watch the final cut on Blu-ray. It looks absolutely splendid. It's spectacular.
Well, that was House on Haunted Hill. Thank you for joining us on that journey. And we'll take a short break and get into the news in a sec. All right. Yes, that was a short break. Now, I wanted to jump straight...
I'm sorry. The break is so short. It reminds me of that scene in Red Dwarf in Future Echoes, where Lister comes running into the drive room and Rimmer says, "Brace yourself for a bit of a shock, Lister, but I just saw you die." And Lister goes, "What?" And Rimmer goes, "I didn't tell you to brace yourself." And Lister goes, "You didn't even pause."
It is a bit like that. It's like, we're just changing gears now. There's no appropriate pause in that. All right, so I want to jump straight into Henry Cavill releasing the statement that he's doing the Warhammer Cinematic Universe. So last week, of course, we looked at how Henry Cavill had a twist of his own, that he's not doing Superman, and Superman's continuing on in its own direction now, and the passing of the torch will be happening, it seems. And of course, before that, he'd left The Witcher, which many people speculated was because of the Superman deal, which seemed to be what it was to everyone's assumption. But yes, classic twist, that's not the case. So Henry Cavill now has announced that he's teaming up with Amazon Studios to develop a series of films and TV shows based on the epic fantasy game Warhammer 40,000. What are your thoughts, Marcus?
Oh, look, I'm disappointed that The Witcher is losing Henry Cavill, because I do think he's the most interesting part of The Witcher. I think it's kind of just like Game of Thrones light. I don't care about many characters besides Geralt, Jaskier, Yennefer, and Ciri. I find the supporting cast beyond the four leads is kind of just there. I'm very disappointed that we're not going to get more Cavill as Superman, because I really feel like he's a perfect fit for modern Superman. Because when talking about live action Superman, you have to at some point mention Christopher Reeve, who was like Silver Age Superman, walked off the comic page, whereas I feel like Henry Cavill's a much more sort of cinematic, grounded representation of what he'd be like as a real person. I think Man of Steel was flawed but enjoyable. Batman v Superman exists, and I thought he was really good in the Snyder cut of Justice League. So the fact that we're not getting more Cavill as Superman does make me very sad, especially because, you know, the spoilers for Black Adam, the ending of Black Adam is setting up Superman and Black Adam to end up taking a swing at each other.
Yeah, and part of the surprise, I think, was because it looked so done and dusted in terms of, you know, The Rock's involvement, bringing Cavill in, the whole drama around why Cavill hadn't appeared as Superman for a while, and the changing of the guard at DC, meaning that Cavill's back and was going to, and there were a couple of rumors around what type of even rebooting of Superman they might be doing. So yeah, it was a surprise that Cavill's run now is just the Snyder films. with a small cameo in Black Adam.
I really do wish that Warner Brothers / HBO Discovery had just done like a crisis movie to reboot everything, because there are all these loose threads now floating around. I wish they just wrapped it up in just an Infinite Crisis style, just retcon. Just get rid of all the plot threads and allow themselves to hit the ground running.
Because it does seem confusing, because one of the other confusing aspects of this is Jason Momoa being rumored to be cast as Lobo now. That, of course, he has been Aquaman.
Yeah.
But the speculation around various articles is that he's going to now be cast as Lobo, which is a good fit, I think, for his type of personality. I think it is a fit, the Lobo character, who's a very kind of, how would you describe him? A kind of larrikin type meathead, butch character.
If we're going back to TV tropes, he's an indecisive parody, because he's meant to be a takeoff of like 90s anti-heroes like Deadpool, but they can't. It's very unclear if they're actually, if he's a parody or if he's just like an extreme example. This always reminds me of Yati Croshaw saying that there's a difference between parody and playing everything straight like in Bulletstorm, but saying that you're being ironic.
Yes. Yeah, and ultimately it relies upon the audience's literacy to unpack that meta-ness, and that might not occur. And if that meta-ness is lost, then you're just read as the very thing you're meant to parody, or lampoon, or question, or query. You just form that cipher.
I just really wish that DC had, I don't know, just not twiddled their thumbs so much in terms of making movies. Because they had all these plans that they just couldn't get into gear because they just sat around for too long.
And some great talent collected around that space. And some of it had received a lot of positive vibe. I mean, the first Amazon movie, Wonder Woman movie, got a lot of positive credibility. And some of that may have been Chris Pine's involvement in it. I mean, certainly the second Wonder Woman movie, Chris Pine was seen as probably one of the best things about it.
Yeah, I think everyone was on form in the original Wonder Woman movie, but in the second one, I just don't think Patty Jenkins was as interested in the story she was telling. It just didn't seem, I don't know, it just didn't seem as much fun as the original Wonder Woman. It was more like she was having fun with the design and the aesthetic, but she wasn't really having a lot of fun with the story. I don't know. I think the other problem there is that the reason why the original Wonder Woman does work so well is because it is a fish out of water story. And Gal Gadot she's just so good in that first one when she sort of like plays that, that I guess that childlike wonder, because among the Amazons, Diana is one of the youngest ones. And so because she loses her innocence throughout the film, when she finds out what the world is like, and Chris Pine is a very good straight man to her. But I don't think it works as well when the roles are reversed.
Well, yeah, and I think Chris Pine played it well in terms of the second film, but yeah, it isn't quite as well supported. Gal Gadot doesn't quite provide the same humor that the first one set up with that comedic beat.
Yeah, I think I am also just a little bit tired of the the cliche of the bumbling guy and the much more sensible woman. I like that Wonder Woman sort of, in a way, flipped that. Not to say that Wonder Woman Diana was bumbling in the original Wonder Woman at all. Far from it, because she was, far and away the best fighter and very, very savvy. Just, unfamiliar with the world that she was in. I felt like Wonder Woman 1984 was it was just Marvel light, whereas the original was just superb. What was the point we were trying to make again?
Direction DC's going in. So with their two new creative heads, it'll be interesting to see if they can weather this storm, because I think there's been a lot of criticism towards these decisions and dropping Henry Cavill, and can they pull it all off next year or over the next few years?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing The Flash, just because I'm just looking forward to finally seeing more Michael Keaton as Batman.
Right. Yeah.
Because the fact that Batgirl never got released, got shelved indefinitely when that was going to be Michael Keaton's return as Batman. And also, obviously, Batgirl, seeing her on the screen again would have been terrific, but I'm just an old school Michael Keaton Batman fan, so that was the big selling point for me.
And look, those stories seem to have just dissipated. There's been nothing further I've seen on news around Michael Keaton and Batman for the last 4 or 5 months.
And they're umming and ahhing about Batfleck maybe coming back.
Yeah.
When the whole reason why Ben Affleck left is because the pressure of the job caused him to almost drink himself to death.
So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see where this goes. So yeah, here on Media Mothership, as always, we'll be exploring that. Marcus, thanks so much for coming on this week.
Thank you for having me.
Any thoughts as we're wrapping up 2022 and into 2023? Any media you're particularly excited about next year?
Any media I'm particularly excited about next year? Oh my goodness, that's actually that is a really interesting question. Because I'm sort of playing catch up. I've had a very challenging year, so my backlog at the moment is pretty substantial, and I don't believe there are any. Street Fighter 6. That's what I'm looking forward to next.
Right. Any new characters coming into the Street Fighter 6 canon?
Many new characters coming to the new Street Fighter 6 canon. I have withheld from looking at spoilers or promos or anything along those lines. I've gotten much better at doing that the older
What's
I've
the
gotten.
release date?
Oh, let me check that one for you. I'm pretty
First
sure
half of
it
the
is.
year?
Pardon me?
First half of the year?
I don't know. I hope so. I hope it comes very close to the school holidays so that I can take some time off to get good at it. Because I'm a huge Street Fighter fan, as any of my friends will know. I tend to ramble on a lot. And 5 was a bit of a step down from 4. It's releasing on June the 2nd, 2023.
So just squeaking it in before the mid-year.
Yeah, so that's the one that I'm most excited for.
Thank you. Well, this has been myself, Dr. Craig, joined by Mr. Marcus, MA for Media Mothership and Edge Radio. Show notes, as always, will be available on the episode description via YouTube and Twitch, as well as on the podcast. And we'll be back. We'll have a break next week, so we'll be back the week after next to explore our next media material, which will be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I think we're deep diving into the golden age of radio and pulling out some classic, dusty old radio dramas.
Oh, that's going to be so good.
Some surprise stuff, yes. So find out more about Media Mothership on Facebook and Instagram, and keep listening to Edge Radio. Coming up next, we've got Adrian with his show You Can't Sit Down.